Welcome to Cancer Healthcast, where science is driving hope. I'm your host, Nikki Henderson. Today, we are joined by Dr. Jennifer Guida, who is the Program Director in the Basic Biobehavioral and Psychological Sciences branch of the Behavioral Research Program at the National Cancer Institute, and Dr. Kirsten Ness, who is a physical therapist, clinical epidemiologist, and member in the Department of Epidemiology and Cancer Control at St. Jude. They'll be discussing the accelerated aging process of those who survive childhood cancer, preventive interventions that could decrease the risk of premature aging, and the role of AI when it comes to improving care for childhood cancer. Hello, Jen and Carrie. Thank you both so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you.
To start our conversation, Jen, tell me about your role in the Basic Biobehavioral and Psychological Sciences branch at NCI.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. As Nikki mentioned, my name is Jennifer Guida. I'm a program director in the Basic Biobehavioral and Psychological Sciences branch at the NCI. And my role here is really to help develop new areas of science. And I also hold a portfolio of grants in the area of science that I work to develop. So the primary area of science I've been working on for the last several years is related to cancer and accelerated aging. And as part of this work, I try to understand the state of the science, where the research gaps remain, and try to create opportunities to advance this area of science.
Thank you, Jen. And Carrie, what is your role at St. Jude, and how does it tie in with the National Cancer Institute?
Right. So I'm a faculty member, like professor. We just call it something different, at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and in the Department of Epidemiology and Cancer Control. And I'm the co-program lead for the Comprehensive Cancer Center, which is funded by the NCI for cancer control and survivorship, which is sort of our population science program, because our population at St. Jude, being that we're the only comprehensive cancer center devoted to only pediatrics, is the population of children, their families, and then the survivors and their families that we treat. And, nearly all of my work is funded by the NCI. So thanks to the NCI for funding me. And I study accelerated aging in children and adolescents and adults who were treated for childhood cancer when they were younger than age 21. And I first met Jen when the NCI invited me to be part of a think tank. So it's been a great experience, and we've been lucky to be able to collaborate on several projects.
Yes, some of our work Carrie and I started collaborating on happened when I was first a postdoc at the NCI, and which is when the project that we recently got published in Nature Cancer, started coming to fruition when I was a postdoc, and then I became a program director, and so we were able to carry it on, and so it's been a really nice collaboration between NCI and St. Jude.
Wow, well, that's awesome. Well, Jen, researchers have discovered that survivors of childhood cancer are aging at an accelerated rate. Can you tell me, why is this happening?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Well, it's pretty well known in the literature that cancer survivors experience poor physical function, sarcopenia, cognitive decline, and even frailty, and at higher rates than individuals who are of the same age as them, but do not have cancer. And all those previous conditions that I just mentioned, poor physical function, sarcopenia, cognitive decline, frailty, those are all conditions that are typically associated with age, so older age, right? In terms of accelerated aging, meaning that the process of aging itself has been sped up. A lot of this evidence, I think the most compelling evidence, in fact, comes from the adult survivors of childhood cancer, because conditions and diseases associated with aging, like frailty, for example, should not occur in early to midlife. So some of Curie's work related to frailty really, I think, drives this point home, because frailty is typically only observed in older adults, right? And so childhood cancer survivors in the St. Jude Lifetime cohort study who, had a prevalence of frailty around 10% at a mean age of 33 years old, compared to sibling controls who had a prevalence of frailty around 0%. Even though 10% frailty in the survivors of childhood cancer is a seemingly small percentage, the point is that 0% should be frail. 0% of young people should be frail. So our new study dovetails nicely, I think, with this work because we're using the same population. We measured biological age, which is how old you are on the inside at the cellular level. And we show that these adult survivors of childhood cancer are not just biologically older, but they're aging more rapidly than age and sex match controls. And also, we looked at the general population as measured by the NHANES 3 survey. And so these survivors are also aging faster and are biologically older than the general population. So together, the high prevalence of frailty at a substantially younger age than what we would normally expect, and the evidence that these survivors are biologically older and aging more rapidly strongly suggests that these survivors are experiencing premature or accelerated aging. So you asked, why is this happening? Well, we know that, in particular, radiation and chemotherapy don't always spare normal tissue. And in some cases, this can leave survivors with less than optimal organ system structure and function. Evidence from animal models shows us that radiation, as well as the genotoxic and cytotoxic effects from chemotherapeutic agents, can create sufficient damage that parallels or even mimics the biological aging process. In mice, for example, we see that changes to aging biology lead to the emergence of aging phenotypes, which suggests that cancer treatments itself can lead to direct changes in biological aging processes, which then leads to the onset of some of these age-related conditions like frailty, for example. It's still relatively unknown which specific treatments accelerate the biological aging process and why some patients experience premature aging and others do not. But our study points to specific cancer treatments like stem cell transplant and vinca alkaloid chemotherapy as cancer treatments that accelerate the trajectory of aging for adult survivors of childhood cancer.
Okay, Ajin, thank you so much for explaining that. Well, Carrie, what is the Human Performance Laboratory, and can you outline some of its key objectives?
Sure. So the Human Performance Laboratory is like going to the gym, kind of. So we have machines and things where we can test function. So we get to run on a treadmill, and we measure all sorts of stuff about your lung function and your balance and how fast you can walk. And so essentially, it's a lab that measures how people move and function in daily life. And that's really what's important. So I always liken it to, everybody can tell if somebody's having difficulty walking down the street. You can see that. But in the Human Performance Lab, we figure out why you're having difficulty moving down the street. What is it about your body and your organ systems that are contributing to this? But really, our mission is to actually describe physiologic physical function in childhood cancer survivors and in children with cancer as they move through life. So across the cancer continuum. So we see people in the lab from diagnosis till death. So we follow them for years and years. And that's how we discovered this frailty phenotype. I was like, why do these 30-year-old people have gray hair and wrinkles and walk like they're a little old lady? That's just, and I thought, let me bring them into the lab and see what's going on. And luckily, we were already measuring all the things in the lab that had been used to characterize aging in the cardiovascular health study years ago. And so we were able to capture that data and compare that to the cardiovascular health study. And, childhood cancer survivors have a higher percentage of frailty when they're 30 than people ages 65 to 101. And so, our main objective is to characterize this so that we can design interventions. So we figure out why, and then we design interventions to address it, because not everybody's the same. So, childhood cancer survivors, as my friend Patty Gantz would say, are like canaries in the coal mine. they're sort of the people who are telling you what's happening in the aging world. And so we want to capture this. My interest is in physical function because I'm a physical therapist. So of course, that's where I head, but there's other things that happen like cognitive decline or people who have significant emotional health problems. And so, we also want to figure out if we can understand that. So in addition to the human performance laboratory where we measure movement and function, we have a behavioral and cognitive science laboratory where they measure cognition and emotional health in this population. And that's led by Dr. Kevin Krull here. So, we're able to, in our cohort, capture all of these things that are important to people that matter in daily life. So I always like to think of human performance as how you do every day. What guides every day? What makes it so that you can go to church or go to lunch with your friends or function in your job or attend school or, watch your kids play soccer, whatever you need to do. What is it that you have to be able to do? And that's what I like to measure.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, Jen, what tools are being used to help identify survivors who are at a higher risk of frailty and dying early? And are there any preventive interventions to decrease the risk of premature aging?
Yeah. So, I think Curie's Human Performance Lab is kind of an anomaly. Most institutions don't have something like that. But it's definitely needed, right? I think that some clinics will do something called a geriatric assessment to identify individuals who are at high risk of becoming frail. But usually this is tested before treatment initiation. And sometimes it's done after completion of treatment. But as Curie mentioned, some of these conditions are, they don't show up right away. They show up decades later. And so that plus, the field of accelerated aging is still quite in its infancy. And so the reason that our recently published study is important, I think, is because, again, not only do conditions like frailty show up decades later, but the goal is to really be able to intervene before the onset of these conditions. And so if you can measure with something like biological age that shows on the inside how these changes to the aging process are occurring, and we know that they're associated with the aging outcome, we can use them to predict who is going to develop frailty or die earlier than others, right? And so in our study, we showed that 7 different measures of biological age were consistently and robustly associated with both frailty and premature mortality, suggesting that these measures could be used to monitor and identify survivors at high risk for premature aging, and potentially be used as surrogate markers of aging endpoints themselves. So I think an important next step here would be to test these measures of biological age as surrogate endpoints in clinical trials to see if interventions themselves, interventions like exercise, for example, or senolytic drugs can actually delay or slow, biological aging. As for what's known, I think in terms of interventions that do prevent premature aging, again, the field is still in its infancy, but Curie can probably talk to great lengths about the role of exercise as a safe and effective treatment strategy to reduce morbidity and mortality and preserve functional capacity. Other promising but understudied approaches include testing things like senolytic drugs to target the process of cellular senescence, which is one of the hallmarks of aging, to prevent things like functional decline. I would say less is known about the relationship between diet and nutrition in the context of mitigating accelerated aging in cancer survivors, but there is some evidence that suggests that in animal models anyway, fasting during chemotherapy can decrease chemotherapy toxicity. And also that protein supplementation can prevent chemotherapy toxicity and improve outcomes like sarcopenia and functional capacity in cancer patients. But I think this is an area of science that could definitely be further developed.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to shift the conversation just a little bit here. We're going to talk about AI. There's so much talk about AI, and many organizations and agencies are using AI for many things, and there are a lot of benefits to it. So, Kiri, what role does AI and machine learning play in improving care for childhood cancer?
Well, so, big data has been around for a while, and AI is a tool, machine learning is a tool that can help us better understand what's going on when we have what I call massive amounts of data. But for AI to really work, you need a pretty good algorithm. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. So one example for survivors is the Children's Oncology Group long-term follow-up guidelines, which have been systematically essentially assembled over years, where experts review all the literature and then write this huge document, and it's huge, identifying what screening processes need to be done for survivors of childhood cancer after they're done with treatment. So how often do you need to get an echocardiogram? How often do you need to get a mammogram? You have to get a mammogram earlier if you've got chest radiation. How often, when should you be screened for colon cancer? So they're guidelines, but it's a hefty document. So I think the application of AI to, we can use the document, and there's algorithms that will spit out, what people need to get. That comes out on a survivorship care plan. But if you don't know what you got, so this is my example, if you don't know what you got, but you kind of know what you had, then AI could perhaps then scroll through this large document and figure out what kind of screening you should have, given that you don't really know what drugs you were exposed to as a child. Because if you were 3 and nobody got you a care plan, that's one way that AI could be used. I think that there's some promise there. AI also can be used to do natural language processing in the medical record. So, little nuances about why people are different. And I'll use one of Jen and her mentors, why some people are exceptional, why some people do really well. I think that discovering that might require AI, so we can discover the little nuances of why people are different, or something that we haven't thought of before. But one example we're using in my lab right now of AI is that we are looking to see if wearing an Apple Watch for 15 seconds and detecting the EKG, which is one of their FDA approved measures, for heart failure. And that's a AI type analysis, because they don't just look at the wave on the EKG like a normal doctor would, but they take every little ditzel, I call them the little ditzels, every little data point that's collected by the EKG. And we send that off we do a regular EKG and we do an Apple EKG at the same time. We send that off to Wake Forest, and they have a cardiac center. That study is funded by the NCI. And they can predict who's going to have heart failure later on, even if they currently don't have heart failure. And that's important, because you can wear an Apple Watch or any other, I'm not necessarily promoting just Apple, but you can wear a smart watch of some kind that has a EKG approved on it, and somebody might be able to tell you that you're at risk, and thus you could do an intervention sooner for somebody who is going to develop heart failure. So I think that's where we've found it has utility so far. And again, AI is kind of like what I call taking the world by storm right now. Like, I try to turn it off when I'm searching the internet. Stop, don't. But just because I want to think my old way. But I think that it will improve care, because we have such big data. It's certainly machine learning is important for all these small physiologic measures, and then also for vast amounts of patient-reported outcome data that's just vast. What the social worker note says, what the nurse's note says, what the mom said. If we can combine that all to figure out what the pattern is, and the computer can help us learn that, then instead of beating Ken Jennings, they can beat the best expert, the best oncology expert on the market. That's sort of how I think about AI.
Right. Thank you so much. That is amazing that it can be used as an intervention to detect heart failure. That's great. Well, Jen, what is the behavioral research program doing to help researchers better understand the aging consequences of cancer and cancer treatments?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So currently we have a webinar series called the Perspectives in Cancer and Aging Arthi Huria Memorial Webinar Series, which serves to honor Arthi Huria, who was just a pioneer in this field. I mean, she really is the one who got me interested in this way back when, and her loss was such a devastating blow to this community. And so, in this webinar series, we really strive to honor her legacy and also try to bring researchers together to share new research insights. And it's in its 5th year now, this webinar series. And I'm continuously blown away by it seems like we have more attendees every webinar than we did before. So, we're going to try to keep it going. And it's just a really wonderful way to learn about what's going on in the field, and hopefully for researchers to forge collaborations with one another. We've had a few funding opportunities that have now been sunsetted. It was a notice of special interest on aging trajectories, and also there was a funding opportunity related to building cancer and aging infrastructure. Both of those, as I mentioned, have been sunsetted. But we do encourage applications to parent announcements in this area. NCI is still very much interested in this area. And we continue to see more applications come in related to this area, which is great. Also, one thing to keep your eye out for is my colleagues, Lisa Galicchio, Paige Green, and I, who do the webinar series and are heavily invested in this area. We are coming out with a special section in the Journal of Cancer Survivorship. Hopefully that'll be out either this summer or early fall, related to cancer and accelerated aging. Kiri, of course, is one of the, invited people to submit a special manuscript, but hopefully that will be one way in which we can spread more knowledge about this field and get more people interested.
Oh, well, congratulations on that. That's awesome. We'll definitely keep an eye out for that. Well, Kiri, after overcoming cancer, I know a top priority is, of course, staying healthy. What is the after completion of therapy clinic, and how is it helping survivors of childhood cancer lead healthy and productive lives?
So the after completion of therapy clinic is a clinic that children who are treated at St. Jude are transferred to, a special clinic run by Doctors Melissa Hudson and Dr. Daniel Mulrooney, where they move from being sort of followed by their primary treating oncologists. Although Dr. Hudson and Dr. Mulrooney are both oncologists, they are then followed by these physicians who are experts in aftercare or experts in knowing what surveillance needs to be done. But I think, and that's very important. And the program is, children come to this program when they're 5-year survivors, and they stay in the program until they're age 18 or until they've been done with their cancer for 10 years. So if they were treated for cancer at 15, they're not going to leave after completion of therapy clinic till they're 25. So they get followed for 10 years in that clinic. And then of course they come over to the St. Jude Lifetime cohort, and then we follow them forever. But the after completion of therapy clinic is unique because they provide all these other services. So they do cancer screening because people who've had cancer need some different surveillance than the rest of the population, but they also help them with things like obtaining an appropriate primary care provider, making sure that they get the school services they need if they're still children, helping them transition to college if they're young adults who are, getting ready to move to college, helping them figure out insurance if they, now St. Jude doesn't charge for anything, but when you go to the regular community, you get charged. So helping them figure out what kind of insurance they might need when they're going to come off their parents' insurance, helping them find a specialty provider in their home community if they need to be followed for some sort of a heart disease or if they have some other sort of a problem, helping them get rehabilitation services if they have some sort of physical or cognitive disability. So essentially, it's sort of like, I consider that it's the ultimate case management for a cancer survivor. They kind of manage it all, and they help the child, adolescent, young adult, and then their caregivers or loved ones navigate this. So I call it the after completion of therapy and navigation clinic is what I call it.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that. Well, before we conclude, Jen and Carrie, I wanted to know if either of you have any final comments or thoughts that you would like to leave with our listeners.
I think one of the things I would like to conclude with, kind of just building off of what Carrie was talking about, the after therapy clinic. I mean, St. Jude is truly a special place, and those resources aren't available to all childhood cancer survivors as well, and even older adults who also have cancer, right? These types of services are needed across all ages for cancer survivors. And I think one thing that we could do a better job of is educating cancer patients and their caregivers about accelerated aging and about the possible host of outcomes that long-term survivors may face, providing services in a holistic way that really helps them live their life. As Carrie mentioned, these survivors get counseled on insurance and, getting help getting into college, or not getting into college, but help with those kinds of resources. And I think just identifying what it is that the survivor needs at that time and helping them get that, right, is really important. We need to help them have the tools and the resources to empower themselves about some of these late effects as well, to potentially help mitigate them, right? Because they have to have agency in their life and empowerment to really address some of these issues. And we need to provide the education and the tools for that.
So what I would like to say for any cancer survivor or caregiver of a cancer survivor or clinician who provides care for a cancer survivor is what I always say: don't smoke, move more, eat less, mostly plants, because you can't change the cancer therapy that you got because you already got it. And so until we invent the exercise pill or until senolytics are perfected, you can control those things in your life. And even if you have physical or cognitive disability or emotional health problems after cancer, there's opportunity for you to have programs designed for you that are modified so that you can take control over your own health. And I think that that's super important. And it probably doesn't only apply to childhood cancer survivors or adult cancer survivors, but to all of us. I think that as resilient, responsible humans, we know that exercise, not smoking, and eating a balanced diet are, things we have control over. So we might as well try and do it.
And I would add sleep as an important factor, and also not drinking alcohol.
Speaking as the mother of an infant, sleep is
exactly.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much, Jen and Carrie. That was a great conversation, great discussion. And I appreciate both of you sharing such valuable information about childhood cancer and how it impacts the aging process, the preventive interventions, and the benefits of AI. Just thank you for covering all of that information, very important information. And thank you both again for taking out time to speak with me today. And I hope that you both have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
HealthCast, along with GovCast and Cybercast, is a production of GovCIO Media and Research. To explore our content, visit our website, govciomedia.com. Keep an eye out for new episodes every Tuesday. And if you like what you heard, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. Have a topic you want us to discuss? Contact us at newsletter@govcio.com.